Good morning. I don't know about y'all, but I just wanted to cancel this and stay downstairs and listen to him some more. So sorry you have to come up and listen to me now, but here we are. All right. So before we get started, I want to give a little brief introduction of myself and where I'm from. So my name is Love Kingsbury, and that's right. You heard me right. It's Love. I have crazy parents. And I am from Virginia. I work for Virginia's Parent Training Information Center, PEATC. I've worked there for about 5 years now. Before I started working for PEATC, I was an educational advocate. And before I was an educational advocate, I was a parent sitting in meetings and not having a lot of luck with what was going on with my meetings and feeling in my gut that something was wrong. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know how to fix it, but something was happening and I needed help. And I went to PEATC and they didn't really have a lot of information about dispute resolution. The advocate I was working with at the time, she did not believe in dispute resolution. So she didn't share a lot of information with me. But when I started going to other parents' meetings and I started really investigating and reading through procedural safeguards, I did discover that there were lots of alternatives out there, lots of things that I could kind of pursue and figure out what was going on. So as an advocate, I attended mediations with families. I helped families prepare state complaints. And I really saw that there was really great outcomes that could happen. I saw mediations really make a difference in a family's and a child's life with what they could get. I saw state complaints that either families won or families realized this is what the regulations are and this is how we have to work within them, right? But what I saw dispute resolution as was a place that we could really kind of stop the fighting, stop the back and forth, and get somebody else to come in and help us make a decision and then help the family move forward and how they move forward. So when the opportunity during COVID, PEATC was hiring, and I was like, this sounds like a good place for me to land. And I applied and luckily was hired. And then I really brought my love of dispute resolution to PEATC. So, you know, a little backstory. My mom used to say I should have been an attorney because I would argue with a fence post. And now I probably see that she was right. But really what it's about is getting that resolution and coming to an agreement with all of the parties. So why does this matter? So the number one is it prevents escalation, right? That early resolution. It's going to prevent families getting to that point. It's going to prevent having to spend a lot of money. If you are trying to hire an advocate, if you have to hire an attorney to go through due process, that is a lot of time and effort that is being spent when honestly, as a family member, I know how stressful it can be to have a child with a disability. Right? I love my son. I would not trade him for anything. He has brought me so many gifts in my life. But I'm sure that we're all a little familiar with that 2009 study from Wisconsin that said having a child on the autism spectrum is comparable to soldiers in battle. That same stress level. And it's not just autism. It is any disability, right? I know that. I have felt that in my life. And we want to build trust and relationships with the people who are there educating our students, right? I don't want to be in battle with the school division. I don't want to distrust that they are not doing what they are supposed to be doing. I want to have an open communication with them. I want to have a relationship with them. That doesn't mean I need to be best friends with anybody. It doesn't mean we need to hang out and do anything on the weekends together, but I need to feel like that my child is safe when he goes to school, right? Just like any parent feels. And like I talked about, that stress level that you have, this is not worth it. I have too many other stressors in my life. Just knowing that I have this child with a disability and trying to figure out what is his life going to look like. Because I don't know if any of you, I think we all come into this industry, we all come into this usually because we have somebody, right? That's what has inspired us to come and work. Nobody's getting rich working in education, right? That's not a thing. So usually we are all coming into this because we have a personal connection into this. And I don't know if any of you have children with disabilities, but I know when my son was diagnosed, my initial thought was, oh, I can never die. This is what this means now. Who's going to take care of him? Who's going to love him? Who's going to protect him? We all know the statistics, right? Our children with disabilities, young adults with disabilities, they are at a much higher level to be abused in many different ways. So I need to be able to focus on that instead of focusing on what is happening in the school. So having early resolution to any dispute is always going to be better than having to go through dispute processes. However, I also know as a parent how important it is to understand these processes. These all sound very legal because they are. There's legal things behind them. I did not go to school to be an attorney. I did not come into this with an understanding of what our Virginia code said, what IDEA said. And so I wanted to be able to help families understand what their options are and to give them ways that they can move through these processes. So this is just a real brief overview. If you work in this space, you know our prevention is our communication. It may be a facilitated IEP meeting if your state offers that. We do offer that in Virginia. It's not in our regulations. It's not in IDEA, but we do offer it as a support system to families. Then we go into our resolution. We have mediation. We have state complaints. We have manifestation determination review meetings, which I call the most important meeting that you will probably ever have. And then we come down to adjudication with due process and even courts being involved. This is a scary process for families. This is a scary process, I think, for school divisions being involved in this. Nobody wants to come down and have to go to court about this. So if we can try to head this off at the beginning, we're all going to have better outlooks. So we have developed a dispute resolution overview, little guidebook. It is very brief. Please use that QR code and see what it looks like. It really kind of walks you through all of the different steps for facilitated IEP meetings, mediations, state complaints, due process, and expedited due process hearings. It's all laid out in the same format. You're going to get the same information you're going to see. So hopefully it's going to provide families with the information that they need in order to make an appropriate decision on how they want to move forward. As working for the Parent Training Information Center, I get phone calls from families and they say things to me like, well, I want that teacher to lose her license. And I say, well, none of these processes are going to get you that, friend. That's not a thing. So here's what you can get from these different processes. Here are the benefits. Here are the considerations. This is an at-a-glance resource. It doesn't go into all the ins and outs in this resource. It does do a comparison with a side-by-side of all of the different options that you have and when that might be right? So like we know we can go to mediation about anything, but state complaints are going to be regulatory issues. Sometimes families call and they say, I want to file a complaint because I want my child in this other class. Well, unless this is a least restrictive environment kind of option, that's not an option, right? So talking through with families and really helping them understand, because knowledge is power. I was raised in the 70s and 80s. I'm telling you how old I am, which is, according to my kid, old. And I grew up with hearing that on Saturday mornings. Knowledge is power. And I believe that wholeheartedly, right? It's just like that gut feeling that I got in those meetings, things aren't going right. I didn't have the knowledge behind me to know what exactly wasn't going right, but I knew something wasn't. So this hopefully gives that knowledge. It helps families choose what's the right option. What should I be focused on here? Is mediation, is that workable? Should I file a state complaint? Do I have to set off the nuclear bomb and go to due process? What do we need to do? We have all of our guides, all of our information, of course, is free and accessible in English as well as in Spanish, because let's be honest, we have a lot of cultural issues out there. We have a lot of things that certain families don't feel like they have the right to access, or they're scared to access those. They don't know what that means. Maybe their culture is, they weren't raised in a culture where you question authority. Real quick story. I was in a fight with my dad. I was 17. We were standing in our driveway and we were yelling at each other. I don't even know what the fight was about. And I remember at a certain point, my dad just started laughing. And it infuriated me. I said, why are you laughing at me? This is not funny. He said, I'm not laughing at you. I'm laughing because I know I never have to worry about you. If you will talk to me this way, you will talk to anybody that's this way. I never have to be concerned. And so I know that I have power in my voice and in the way that I do apply my knowledge, but I know that I am not every parent. And not everybody feels that way. I talk to plenty of families who say, I'm not confrontational. I don't want to do that. I don't want to be confrontational. Okay, well, let's talk through this and let's figure out how we can do this in a non-confrontational way, because you still have the right to pursue these options. We were lucky when Congress decided, hey, we know that parents and schools are not always going to agree on things. So families need to have options in how to do this. These are our toolkits. They are beautiful. I love them more than anything. Mediation, state complaint, due process, and manifestation determination reviews. Don't worry, I've got QR codes for all of these so that y'all can pop them up and look at them. And later on, we're going to do some interactive activities. I know you're all excited about that as well. But this is the way they look, right? This was very important to me when I came to PEATC, to be able to provide this information to families. You know, we are not obviously legal service providers, right? I can't tell you what to do. I'm never going to tell a family what to do. I'm not inside that house. I don't know what the full situation is, but I can provide options. And I want to do it in a way that's going to make it easy for families to understand those options. Our mediation toolkit really, I think, simplifies this process. The biggest question I get from families when they call in is, tell me what that looks like. I've never been through mediation before. I've heard about it, but I don't know exactly what this looks like. Our toolkit really that's later, sorry. Our toolkit really kind of explains and simplifies this, right? What can you expect? How do you prepare for mediation? What documents do you need to gather? How do you need to be looking at mediation? Hopefully, we're going to be building those communication skills. A lot of times I spend on the phone with family, I do role playing with families. Let's talk about this. What if the school division says this? How are you going to respond? How are you going to manage your emotions? This can be very emotional, right? For families. And I think for people from the school division participating, but from families, I know sitting there listening to other people talk about my child, I know how emotional that can be. I know what that can stir up inside me. So we need to talk about how you're going to manage these things. I really hope that mediation is going to promote relationship-based approach, right? You are wanting to work with your school division. I am wanting you to work with me. We need to come up with a decision together on how to make this better for this child, because that's the purpose of all of this, right? When I talk to families all the time, I'm like, that IEP, it's not the school's IEP. It's not the parent's IEP. It is the child's IEP. Let's keep it focused on the child and keep it student focused. And then hopefully it's going to model some problem solving framework that we can now take into our IEP meetings and work better together as a team. I hate when I hear people say the school team, the parents team. It is one team. It is one team. We are further dividing by labeling it like that. We have one purpose here. It is the child. It is the student. It is making sure that they are getting what they need. So if we can hopefully model that, because let's be honest, a lot of us did not go to school, with some exceptions of some people that I see here. We did not go to school to learn how to communicate with people. And that's unfortunate, right? It really is. Because when you are suddenly in the middle of a meeting and you're in a disagreement, sometimes it's hard to communicate with significant others or close friends when we're in the middle of a disagreement with them, right? Imagine now you're in a room with people who you don't really know, and it is about the most personal thing in your life. It's your child. Your emotions, that emotional flooding happens, and now you are all out of sorts, and now communication breaks down. So hopefully working through this with families, they can really see this is how you do it. This is how we're going to communicate with each other. Sometimes we need that modeling to understand how this works better. Okay. Our complaint toolkit. It's confusing, right? That legal framework, those words, the way that, I don't know about your particular states, but the Code of Virginia can sometimes be a bit confusing. There's a lot of different interpretations and different regulations, right? Some of them, though, are pretty straightforward. So what I hope to do with this is really kind of demystify that. Demystify, what are your legal rights? Have you read through your procedural safeguards? As an early parent, every time I walked into a meeting, they said, here, you want a copy of this? And I was like, no, I've got 50 of them. Did I read through all of them? No, I had not. I had not. I should have, right? We all know that. But a lot of times when I talk to parents, do you know what your rights are? They don't know. They don't have any idea what their rights are. And sometimes our procedural safeguards are even written in a way that can be a little confusing. So really kind of pulling it out, here are some key words. I need you to pull out those procedural safeguards. I need you to look through those. I need you to know where you can go to find the Code of Virginia and read through. Do you need to be a legal scholar to understand all that? No, but you can read it. And hopefully if you have questions, go back to your team, talk to your team about that. I tell parents all the time, document, 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 document. If it's not in writing, it didn't happen. So this kind of strengthens that, right? This is why we do that. In case you ever need to use any of these dispute resolution options, you can go back and you can pull all of your emails, all of the different things that you've sent to the school. This is why it's important. Let's put together a timeline. Let's figure out where this all went bad and what we need to be working on. And is this tied to a state or federal regulation? And I hope it promotes reflection and self-assessment. Because sometimes I talk to families and we talk through things and we figure out at the same time, the school is actually doing what they're supposed to be doing, right? I'm never going to be one that's going to say the school is all wrong and the parents are all right. That is not a thing, right? It's just not. So hopefully they're able to take a step back and go, oh, well, according to this regulation, this is what this says. And I wish that it went a little further, but it doesn't. And now they are meeting what their requirement is, right? And I've seen state complaints really reinforce that accountability and systems change. I'm a big believer in everybody has a boss. Everybody has a boss. My boss tells me on a daily basis what I can and cannot do, what I can and cannot say, right? Because she knows how far I can go. So sometimes she has to reel me back in a little bit. So sometimes school teachers, case managers, they've just been told things. This is how we do this here. We have eligibility meetings here on Tuesdays at 2. And so when families call me and I say, oh, well, actually, the regulations say it has to be at a mutually agreed upon time and location, right? That case manager may not be trying to do something wrong. This is just what they've been told, right? Sometimes bad information gets passed down. I talked about this yesterday at the end of one of my sessions I was in. And there's all kinds of bad information out there, right? All you have to do is look through social media and you're going to find all kinds of bad information. I get phone calls from parents who say, my child has a disability and has an IEP and they got suspended. They're not supposed to do that. Yeah, they can, right? But they just believe, they see it, right? I don't think school staff are any different. If somebody's boss is saying, this is how we do it here, this is how we've always done it, I don't think anybody's intentionally trying to hurt children. I just don't. Nobody's getting into education to get rich. They're there because they love children. They want to help children. And sometimes they're just not given the correct information. So sometimes if you file a complaint and then all of a sudden that case manager now sees, oh, that wasn't good information. Hopefully it's going to create a systems change, right? They're not going to do that anymore. That's the hope. I'm not saying it always happens, but that's the hope, right? That it's going to make that change. Okay. Due process. Due process is, in my opinion, very scary. And we really hope with this toolkit to clarify this very complex legal option. I'm also going to be as honest with my families as I can be. So for instance, in Virginia, I know that nationwide, about 30% of families win due process cases. In Virginia, it's less than 2%. In Northern Virginia, it's less than 1%. Why is that happening? I can't tell you. We have a whole commission on youth that's investigating right now to figure out what is happening. But that is the reality of the situation. So when I talk to families and they are mad and they are like, I'm going to due process. Okay, let's talk about this. Now, there are great due process cases, right? We know that. There are cases that have made changes for our children across this country. But I also know that in Virginia, it can be an uphill battle. I need them to understand what the reality of that situation is. Not discouraging anybody. I know families who have gone and who have done it by themselves, right? They have been pro se. They have not had an attorney and they have won due process cases. I also know that that is the minority of cases though. So I need you to think very carefully. We're going to talk through this. I'm also going to tell you that you don't have to have an attorney, but that school division is going to have an attorney. And in Virginia, it's one group of attorneys that represent about 85% of our school divisions. And they are very good at what they do, right? And so I know that going in. The family may not know it, but I know it. I'm going to share that information with them. I'm also going to help build confidence in how they can participate. Because this is a legal thing, right? It's court without being in court. So they need to know this is how you prepare. This is how you're going to move forward. This is how you're going to do this process. And I want you to make informed decision making. Informed decision making is huge. So in Virginia, we are very fortunate. This is our gift in Virginia, is that we are one of just a handful of states that we require parental consent for any change in an IEP. It is not an IEP team decision about change. It is a parental consent decision. Nothing can be changed. I have families who their child got an IEP in kindergarten. They never signed another one. They still have the same IEP. Team recommends that they get rid of the IEP. Parents said, no, thank you. We're going to keep it. Right? Now, some of that is good. Some of that is, though, we still should be making progress, right? It does no good to just have a document sitting there that's really not doing anything for a student. But it is a gift in Virginia that we have. And it's why I stayed, to be perfectly honest, because I did not want to lose my right to say, no, I'm not going to, it's not your decision. This is actually ends up being my decision on how this works. And we also provide templates and we provide examples in our toolkit. This can be some of the things you're going to talk about. This can be how this works for you. NDR hearings. Let's go back to that family that said, my child has an IEP. They got suspended. They can't be suspended. They can be suspended, right? I also know Virginia, while we have that gift that I talked about parental consent, Virginia is the #1 state for the school to prison pipeline. More of our kiddos go straight to jail after school than any other state. A third of young adults in jails in Virginia are identified as having IEPs. I'm going to guess that more than that needed IEPs. I'm also going to share that my child, not my youngest child, but my oldest child was part of that pipeline. I could never get her an IEP. She never had any legal protections. She was forced into an alternative school. I had no options. She was arrested multiple times in that alternative school. And at 15, she decided she was never going back. And I really didn't have too much to say because she said, they treat me like a criminal. And I said, right, they do. And so later on, she went on to jail. Different things happened. She's doing much better now. She's doing great. But I know that this is what this can lead to. We criminalize our students in Virginia. We put preschoolers in handcuffs. It is a sad, sad thing that we are doing. But NDR hearings really are so important. And sometimes I hear from families that a school personnel has said, oh, you don't even need to come. This isn't required that you're there. Yeah, you need to be there. And this is also why we're having lots of discussions. If your student is having behaviors, all of that needs to be listed in the IEP. So many times I'll talk to families and they go, oh, it's not, It was never in the IEP. We never put it in. Okay, well, that's going to make it really hard to prove then that this was a manifestation of their disability, right? I hope that this MDR kit keeps parents participating, knowing the information that they can bring in, knowing how they can present this. Because it's two questions, right? Is it a manifestation of the disability, and was the IEP being done appropriately? So let's talk about that. Do you have evidence that either one of those things? Let's talk about how you are going to bring that into that MDR meeting and have those discussions. I also want to connect behavior to disability and supports. What does your child need now? If we know this is happening, what do we need to have in place in the IEP to make sure this doesn't happen again? If we have an MDR meeting, we already know we're at that 11th day, right? We're at 11th day of suspension. We get 10 free days is how I like to refer to it. We got 10 free days that a student can be out. On that 11th, we now have to have this. Let's talk about it. Let's talk about how we can do this better. And I want to encourage constructive advocacy. I don't need to go up and flip tables. I may want to. I tell parents, I am the cautionary tale. I was at an IEP meeting one time, and I remember I looked at the coordinator sitting across the table from me, and I thought, today is the day I'm going to jail. This is it. I love the University of Tennessee. I wear orange. I've never worn all orange, but we're going to see how I look in it, because today is that day. Nobody should be made to feel that way. And that was a real feeling. That was a real, I'm so upset right now. I'm not a violent person, but I'm about to reach my limits here, right? So let's have some constructive advocacy. That didn't help anybody. Me reacting that way, me doing all that, that wasn't helping. So I want to talk to families. What are some things you can talk about? Let's talk about FBAs. Let's talk about BIPs, right? Behavior intervention plans are really important. Let's talk about putting that in the IEP if it's not already in there. Maybe it'll stop this next time something happening. Yes, sir.
Previously, you had said any change to an IEP requires consent and revision.
Yes, sir.
Is that include not just services, but like goals?
Anything. Anything requires consent. And we also allow partial consent. So I can consent to goals and services, and maybe not, I don't consent to that placement. And they have to stay. So then we have kind of what I like to call a Frankenstein IEP, where we take our previous IEP, whatever I've signed, and we merge it with that new one. But yes, sir, any change in an IEP in Virginia requires parental consent. All right, this is the fun part of the day. We're going to do a little interactive case study. I have a scenario. You guys can look at it yourself. You don't have to work in teams. You can. You don't have to be siloed out. You want to talk to people at your table, please talk to people at your table. But I didn't want to force people to talk at their table. So here we are. The Rivera family. Lucas is 9 years old. He has ADHD and he has a specific learning disability in reading. He receives specialized reading instruction, small group testing accommodations. Parents are reporting that he's missed services and he has a recent disciplinary removal, including an 11-day suspension. They're frustrated. They don't know what to do next, right? After an emotional IEP meeting, they're considering filing a complaint. So on the screen, you've got QR codes for our mediation toolkit as well as our state complaint toolkit. Please take a few moments and kind of look through there. I want to talk about some different things that can happen here. What should we do? We've got a communication breakdown, right? What are some ways that you might help this family through that? And of course, knowing as PTI staff, I'm never directing, I'm never telling families what to do. I'm exploring options with them. But what are some different things that maybe we can look at to kind of move this needle, get us back to actually having functional communication? All right, I'm going to give y'all a couple minutes. And please shout it out, right? We're not. He has been suspended for 11 days. They had an IEP meeting and the parents really didn't feel like that they were offering anything new. 11 consecutive school days. They do, and that's going to be next. Yeah, yeah. But right now, we're just trying to figure out like what should happen. The parents are saying that the school is not delivering the services that he needs. I don't know. Is that maybe that's something, I don't know if he's had an FBA, but maybe that's something that we could talk about, right? So in looking at the toolkit, can you see, are there any ways that that they're trying to like explain? What are the next steps? What would be the next steps in mediation? What would be the next steps in filing a complaint? Okay.
To do it, I would first think NDR would be the only NDR before anything else happened. I would also move NDR. I would recommend that functional behavior assessment be done. And those would be my next steps before, because I mean, more than likely with the state complaint specifically, you're probably picked up at that place anyway. I just know your rights, we could do it without we, well, in my state, it'd be 60. So,
Okay.
so that's what, those would be my.
So the first suggestions are moving just straight to an MDR, not doing mediation, not doing a state complaint. Just let's go to an MDR. Let's see what's going to happen. Okay. Well, here we are in an MDR. So that MDR has been scheduled now, right? So in looking at our toolkits, what rights or supports does that MDR, what does that give you?
Mainly you need to look at what is his disability? What's this a infestation disability? What's his disability or any of the things in his disability? You have to look at the incident, why he was suspended, what was happening. Then you would also need to look at, she said the services aren't being provided. Well, what services aren't being provided? What should have been happening? What data do we have to show the services were or were not being provided?
Right. Okay. Yes, ma'am.
I think I'd be sending them to the PTI to have somebody outside of them help them look at their IEP and highlight what's in that IEP, where things went wrong, what services are supposed to be provided when, so that when they go into a meeting like this, they have some data behind them and documentation.
Right.
Because if we just say, go to the MTR, parents don't know what that is. They don't know how to respond to that.
Sure.
And they might not even know what's in the IEP and how it's supposed to be used. So I would probably first have them talk to like a PTI rep, just to sit down with them and explain what's in there and what the consequences are and what that meeting is going to be, and then guide them through those.
Right. Okay. So looking at the toolkit,
No, in my next side.
no, go ahead.
In my role where I work, that family would be talking, that we would do all of those things, leading up the MDR for that's what they would talk to me about. I wouldn't send them somewhere else. That would be
Sure.
to do that with them and walk through like looking at all there's just.
Right. So looking through the MDR toolkit, are those questions kind of answered? If you look at it, are you, like we are trying to, in our toolkit, we are trying to break it down, right? Just like what you said, let's look at the IEP. Let's look at what is being provided. Let's look at what this process is going to be. Right.
What's this? Is the disability manifestation. That's a focus.
Right. How is that disability impacting that? Yeah, right. What happened in this behavior? Is that part of this child's disability? Is that inside the IEP? Right. Absolutely. Absolutely. That placement is what's going to happen. In Virginia, we have 3 reasons that a child can still be removed from a school, even if it is a manifestation of their disability, right? Drugs, weapons, serious bodily injury. So I just talked to a family not too long ago, and she said, my child pushed his teacher into the wall. And the teacher continued teaching. Later on, the principal came down and they said, oh, you got pushed into the wall. You need to now go to the nurse and maybe to the emergency room, even though she had continued on teaching. And they said, and now they're saying it was serious bodily injury and they're going to kick him out for 45 days. And I said, well, I have lots of questions about that. Because we have specific in our code what serious bodily injury means. And I think if somebody's able to continue on teaching and they only went to a nurse after they were told to now go. They didn't say, oh, I need to. I don't know if that meets that criteria. However, I'm not an attorney. I say that all the time. Right? But I think I might raise some questions. Please explain to me how this meets up with what our code says.
I appreciate also know your board policy and your and the discipline policy.
Yes. Yeah, school board policies. A lot of people, they sign that document every year, right? I've read the code of conduct and I'm signing off on it. Did you really read it? Maybe not, right? But school board policies can vary. We know that they can't violate what our special education regs are, but they vary across our state in a lot of different ways. So you need to read and understand those. We have a huge push right now in Virginia about cell phone usage and cell phones not being allowed bell to bell. And only in extreme circumstances. And it's got to be outlined in a 504 and an IEP why that student needs their cell phone. And so you need to understand these policies change. How is this going to affect your student who maybe has anxiety and who wants to have their cell phone so that they can reach out at any time during the day? Well, if it's not written anywhere, guess what? They don't get to have it. And sometimes even then, I mean, even if your child has anxiety, the schools can still say, listen, you can come down to the office at any time and call mom. You don't need your cell phone to do that. So knowing, understanding, what does your school board say? What are your policies? What's your code of conduct? What is acceptable? So how can you help them start that meeting by being an equal participant? And I apologize, didn't plug this in. Parents need to be equal participants in all meetings. Do you feel like that the toolkits help them do that?
Preparation. I don't know a lot of people.
Right.
I think there's a power and difference of confident people in regards to educational background. But as far as meaningful participation, I find the preparation, which it allowed them to understand. I mean, I don't know that it's still going to be enough information, it's one thing to read like this.
Sure.
But I think then meaning I am the parent. Now I'm familiar with, okay, there's something called a disciplinary policy. There's something called federal regulation. I didn't know what that was. Really do, but or I do have options of our future. Or I need to talk about this, but I did like that. I still may not fully understand what it is. Each of these things are, but now I know the preparation we have, and here's the things I can ask about. I think it's very, like to your point, it's very important to understand what the disciplinary policy is, because I've seen him get suspended with disabilities and get a more severe punishment or get that, and it's not. It also is, or it's discretionary in whether or not a suspension. There are steps leading up to it, or it's a cumulative effect and whatnot. And parents don't need to know, like they won't give them the code. Like most of the time they're written in like there's some sort of level or some sort of like breakdown of what falls under which policy, and then what the options are for discipline.
Sure.
That's the first step, and often they don't even get told any of that. They just get told that there's something that your son or daughter has done X, Y, Z, they're being suspended. And if they haven't looked to see if they actually fall under what is a suspendable offense, that is actually a great place to start before everything happens.
Absolutely. And we also know that we have a lot of informal removals, right? I don't know if that's a problem in your state. That's a big problem in my state, where parents are called and they're said, hey, Johnny is out of control. I need you to come on up here and pick him up. And when I talk to families and I'm like, okay, you can, right? You can go pick them up if this is an issue. However, you can also ask, is he being suspended? Is there suspension paperwork? If no, then no. Maybe we need to have a meeting and figure it out. Now, some parents want to go pick their child up, and that's perfectly fine. That's their prerogative, right? To go do that. Sorry about that. However, also knowing that's also a thing, right?
And for parents to document that.
Absolutely.
Or they get suspension paperwork from the school, they need to keep track of it and document. Because often our state didn't have guidance on informal removals. And what ended up happening is schools often just change the language that they use.
Right.
In how they handle it, because they're giving the parents the choice. And so therefore, instead of saying, you need to come and pick him up because he's having a rough day, this is happening, they're saying, he's really struggling, I hate to leave him when he's having this really hard time. It really, and then it changes that dynamic of where a parent feels like, oh, well, I hate for everybody, I need my kid to be there and struggling.
Right.
It needs to be, he's having a really rough day. Like, then it puts it back on the parents and they're like, it sounds awful. So it doesn't solve the problem, it changed the dynamic.
Correct.
And put the onus back on the parent, but documenting that piece so you can at least use it when you're talking about, even if you don't go to some sort of, dispute resolution, but looking at it, when you call an IEP meeting and saying, look, you called me this many times because X, Y, and Z has happened, this is what was going on. Obviously, if it has failure in your intervention plan, maybe that's not working, we need to do something else. We
Right.
can look at these options. It gives you, you know, some, it's not just, well, y'all called me a bunch of times and it happens all the time, but documenting saying, you called me 15 times in the last semester.
Correct. Correct. And I will tell you that I went to a meeting with our state ombudsman. It was 4 school divisions and it was about MDR hearings. And he listed out some different scenarios. And he asked, there was about 8 or 9 different school divisions represented there. And he asked questions. Okay, would this be need for an MDR? Different answers across the board. And I was sitting with a superintendent from a school division and I said, if this doesn't show you how much we need training for our schools in this area, I don't know what does. We are all doing it differently. We all have different guidelines because one school division said, oh, we track informal removals and we have a form and everybody else was like, oh, we don't do that. Right. So everybody's doing it differently. Once again, I go back to everybody has a boss and everybody is told this is how we do this here. This is how this works. You know, I think that there is not enough training for families, and there's certainly not enough training for school personnel as well. We're not equipping people to handle. Behaviors are up in Virginia. Are they up in your state? We're having major issues across the board with all kinds of different behaviors. Right? What are we doing to equip our teachers? This is why we're having such massive turnover. I don't want to go to a place where I'm being assaulted or potentially assaulted or abused in different, right? I understand, but then let's figure out, what do we need? Do we need to do a functional behavioral assessment to get a behavior intervention plan? Did we need that? We may have needed that before the suspension, but now we definitely need that, right? Let's talk about what we can do. They went to the MDR and it was found to not be a manifestation of the disability. And the school said that they were doing everything correct on that IEP. And now these parents are really furious. And now they want to go to due process. Because we know that the appeal to an MDR is expedited due process. That is our only option. Right? So in looking at the toolkit, what are some different things that you see inside there that families might want to do before they even consider filing? What is a due process? What does that mean? Should I hire an attorney, right? I've had parents, do I need an attorney to file a complaint? Like, that's how much they don't know, right? This looks legal. It is legal, but no, you don't. But you will. I will tell you this, the school division is going to have an attorney. Do you have to have an attorney? No, the law says you don't. Are they going to have an attorney? Yes, they are. A good one. A very expensive one. Right? What are some questions you need to ask? How are some things, when you're talking to families about these options, what is this going to do for you? What is your goal in going to due process? Because if your goal is to make them pay or to get it, that's not, this is not the way to do it. Right? I find really breaking it down and exploring. I had a conversation yesterday and we were talking about when you have these calls with families and you are talking to them and trying to figure out what they call with an issue. And then at the end of the call, you figure out, oh, what they called with is really not the issue. There's another underlying issue, right? For me, it usually goes back to there haven't been enough evaluations done. That typically 9 out of 10 phone calls that I have with families when they're telling me my child's not getting what they need. And I go back and I look and I'm looking at their IEP and I'm doing evaluation reviews and I'm doing all those things. And I'm like, well, we don't even have enough they haven't done an evaluation in 4 years because the last time they said at the triennial and the school division said, we know that he's going to be found eligible. We don't want to stress him out with doing more evaluations, right? I hear that a lot. So maybe, right, instead of due process, we need to start over. But maybe it is due process. But I want to give you the full look at what this actual process looks like. Like I said, there are good cases, there are great cases. But there are a lot of cases that just get dismissed or the parent it's found that in the school's favor. Yes, sir.
Let's say that the burden on the parent is so in due process. You have to show that the behavior was not a direct and substantial relationship to the disability. So that's a pretty high burden.
It is.
Talking about one day.
Correct.
So it's kind of you want to die on this head.
Correct. In Virginia, the burden of proof is on the party who's bringing due process. I know it's not that way in every state. Washington State, in fact, just switched theirs not too long ago. The burden of proof is always on the school division. But I know in Virginia, the burden of proof is on the person bringing it. So you are exactly right. You have to show without a doubt that the school division did something. I don't know why my computer's not working. Everything's on. Okay, well, let's just continue talking, I guess.
Because say that direct and substantial relationship means that the parent has to assert more than the behavior was related to the disability.
Right.
It has to be both direct and substantial. So you could say, well, this happened, so this happened, so this happened. You lost the direct relationship.
Right.
So it's tough.
It is tough, right? This is a hard process for families. Okay, my computer's apparently died.
I attend.
Okay, thank you so much. Yeah, I'm not sure what's happening. All right, well, I'm going to pull it up on my phone. I know you guys don't have it, but I will get it to you. Yeah, it's on the web site. Thank you. I apologize, everybody.
While we're waiting, can I?
Yeah, please.
In Virginia, we're I'm from Hawaii and we have
Okay.
a very, very tiny group of lawyers
Uh-huh,
that do sped law.
uh-huh.
How is it in Virginia?
Tiny, also tiny. I mean, we do have some attorneys, obviously, but it is still, we have a little more than 3, but it is still pretty tough. I mean, we do have our Legal Aid Justice Center, and they can help families who meet certain criteria, but they are only limited in certain areas of the state. They're not all over the state. It is not as many as what should be, unfortunately. That's a real area of need. And also what I find is the attorneys who are attorneys, they got into that. Like they didn't start out as special education attorneys. They got into it because they have a child or they have a family member and this kind of, then they were like, oh, wait, this isn't working. So we're going to get into it for, this reason. But it is still very difficult to find that attorney. We also have in Virginia, we have, there's an authorized practice of law. We have a specific carve out in our regulations that say advocates can attend due process hearings and not be prosecuted under UPL. I let families know that. I also let families know you better ask lots of questions. You better ask more questions of an advocate, or as many as you would an attorney. I need to talk to other families. What's your history? Have you ever done these cases? Like, what does this look like? Because at the end of the day, we know that due process can really hurt and damage that relationship with the school division. Right. So we have, we have people in the state that, maybe are not doing it the right way, and it creates havoc for other people. Right. So, but yeah, asking all those questions, going through all that. Oh, thank you so much. My computer is not turning on for some reason. It's plugged in, but it's not turning on.
Because it's not connected here. I'm gonna say it.
It's all right. You're on the microphone. It's okay. So apparently I'm not a tech person, y'all. I don't want, surprise, surprise. I know, it's shocking. It is shocking.
She just needs to charge for a moment.
Thank you.
There you go.
You're the best. I'm sorry that I needed you to come do that for me.
And then, I'm sorry, can you also tell me again what?
Yeah.
Yeah,
PEATC?
yes.
PEATC stands for Parent Educational Advocacy Training Center. And so we are Virginia's PTI. We have been for 47 years. We just got our new 5-year grant. So woohoo! We hope that continues. And all of our toolkits were reviewed by Virginia Department of Education in our Office of Dispute Resolution Department there, which is full of attorneys, as well as our manifestation determination review toolkit was also reviewed by our Protection and Advocacy. It's the Disability Law Center of Virginia, or DLCV. They also reviewed it for accuracy to make sure that we were saying all the right things. All right. Let's pop through here. All right. So what do our toolkits do? We're trying to build capacity for families. I want to increase their knowledge. I want them to understand what their rights are. Right? I feel like that so many situations could be averted if parents understood their rights. Right? Especially in Virginia, where you have to sign off on anything being changed in your IEP. So many times I talk to families and they say, they took away my child's speech services. And I say, oh, did you sign the new IEP? Yes. Well, you gave them permission to do that. You don't have to, right? Once again, that's our gift, right? I feel like if more families in Virginia understood that, we would not have the issues that we have. But I want them to still understand it's not always about that, right? It's not always about that consent piece. It can be about different things. I need them to understand where they can go to. Once again, I know not everybody is really comfortable with going to regulations and looking things up. I mean, call us. That's why we're there, right, to do that. Because so many times I will just send over a regulation to a family and say, here, ask your team about this. They said that they won't do more evaluations. Okay. I need you to send this regulation and ask them to explain this regulation to you. And then lo and behold, things happen, right? But I need them to understand they have rights during this process. So many times I think families are just grateful. I'm grateful that my kid can go to school and that you're going to provide these services to them. But I need you to dig a little deeper. I know that probably 90% of families are signing IEPs at meetings. I need you to know that you don't have to. I need you to know there is no deadline for you to sign an IEP. IEPs don't expire. So I need you to know that. You're right.
We're on consent state, so it goes into effect after 40 days regardless.
Once the prior written notice, right. And in our state, our Virginia Department of Education says, don't sign your IEP till you get your prior written notice. I will tell you in my own meeting, I thought we'd all come to an agreement. Lo and behold, I got a prior written notice and I guess we didn't. But if I would have signed it, that would have been over. So I need parents to understand that. I need them to be able to advocate and have some problem solving skills. Right? This can be a very confusing process. This whole dynamic can be very confusing. It's also very intimidating. I'm walking into a room of professionals and experts who are acting like that they know my child better than I know my child. And are presenting things to me. I need to be able to ask questions when something doesn't sound right, when something doesn't feel right. I need to be able to, let's explore some different options, right? I hope that these toolkits do that. I want to promote early and collaborative resolution. I don't want anybody fighting. I know it's going to happen, but I don't want that for any family. I don't want that for school personnel. My best friend's a teacher. I have a whole respect for teachers, right? Because I understand what they are going through. She got a phone call from a parent last week. She called me very upset. That child has an IEP. The parent was yelling at her. I said, I need you to understand that doesn't have anything to do with you. You're just the latest teacher in a long line of disappointment that parent is probably experiencing, right? But I also need them to not have to go in and fight like that and yell like that and upset people. Nobody wants that. We're not working well together when everybody's on the defensive. It's not going to happen. And ultimately, knowledge is power. And unless you have money to have somebody go with you to meetings, you're going to have to navigate this on your own. I need you to understand all these different processes so that you can navigate them on your own. Right? You can always get help. I hate the word independent because I think we're all interdependent. If we are truly independent, that would be a very sad and lonely place, I think. I'm a huge believer in supported decision-making. I use it every day for myself. I call people and ask their help for things, right? I get it. But at the end of the day, I need you to know how to really kind of work this system, how to navigate it and what your rights are and how you can move through it better. Because it's going to make it better for you and your child if you can do that. Okay. Nothing's working for me. I'm giving up. For professionals, right? How do these toolkits help for school personnel? Right? It seems kind of backwards. Maybe we don't want to give families information at the school level on how to pursue these different options. But really, when you're giving them that assistance, you are building trust. Because trust is the bottom, I believe, and the core of our relationships. Once that trust is gone, What are we talking about? Now, I don't believe anything you're telling me. So if you're saying, hey, here's an agency, here are some toolkits, here are some things you can look through, that's going to help families go, oh, okay, we're not so different here, right? Maybe that teacher knows, yeah, this probably isn't right. But I can't come out and say that. So I'm going to give you this information so that you can now go figure it out, talk to people. By using these in your daily work, I know my position at PEATC is I'm the coordinator of staff development and I handle special education dispute resolution calls. So I get all the happy families calling me, right? But I also know that my colleagues that I work with, some of them are not real comfortable in talking about these options. I want these toolkits for them to use as well. I need you to read through them. I need you to figure out how to talk to families. So I'm not the only one talking to parents who want to flip tables. I need you to be able to help build capacity as well and understand. I get it. This can be a confusing process. It can be, an intimidating process. But let's work through it together. Let's figure this out together. And new strategies. I find that schools are very in the box thinkers, right? This is the way it's been done. This is the way it's always been done. This is how we do it. Let's explore outside of that. How can we create some new things, some different things for kiddos? Because maybe the way we've always done it does not work for that child because it's individualized, right? Individualized education program, individualized. So just because my kiddo has autism does not mean he goes in the autism classroom, right? Just because my child has Down syndrome does not mean he goes into a self-contained classroom. So let's talk about what we need to do in order to make this better. I did want to give a shout out, and I meant to do it when I talked about the complaint toolkit. That complaint toolkit really came from FACT Oregon. I was in a cadre meeting a couple of years ago, and FACT Oregon had developed a complaint toolkit and they showcased it to us. And I fell in love with it. And I brought it back and I was like, this is what we need. This is what we need here. So I reached out to FACT and they, of course, because we're all great colleagues, and they were like, yes, take it, run, go, do things with it. We've had about 5 different states reach out to us to ask to adapt our toolkits. Yes, please go, take them, run, go. Because knowledge is power. And the more that we're giving to families, the more knowledge that we're giving to them, the better that this is going to be, right? So we know that the goal of the IEP and IDEA, it says the goal is to get our children to secondary, post-secondary institutions, employment, and independent living, whatever that looks like, just like it is for any child. I know that my child, who did not have an IEP, struggled. I know children with IEPs that are struggling after they get out of school, right? I want families to be able to go back to the school divisions and say, no, this is what we're looking for. This is what we need to do. A no, I think, is just a request for more information, right? How do I give you more information to get to that yes? Also recognizing that sometimes maybe it's not a yes, maybe it is a no, but now we can stop fighting. We can say, okay, we're done with this. We're going to move forward, right? I view dispute resolution as a way to kind of clear the air, right? I don't need to battle about this. I can bring in somebody, a third party, whether it's a mediator, whether it's one of the attorneys and at VDOE to look at your state complaint, whether it's a hearing officer. I'm going to bring in somebody to look at this, to give to help us figure out what needs to take place. We are finishing. I'm giving you about 15 minutes back of your day. I do want to thank everybody for hanging out. I am sorry about all of our technical issues. That was on me. That was my fault. But I do want to thank you because this is such important work that we are doing for families. And giving them that information. I know as a early, I won't say young because my kid would make fun of me, but as a younger parent with him, I guess, I would have loved to have had this information, not because I was ready to do, to go and do but because I was battling with a school and it was causing me so much stress and so much worry and so much everything in my life. I should not have had to have done all of that. And if I would have known at that point, there's options. There's options out here. What we can do, what we can make happen. That would have helped me be able to move past and focus more on him and our home life instead of what's going on at the school, right? So I appreciate every one of you being here. If you would like these toolkits, to take them, to adapt them, to use them, please do. Please do. But nothing would make me happier than these toolkits rolling out across the country. Because I do think it's so important. And I know that as PTI staff, sometimes, we can be intimidated. Not all of us are PTI staff here. I recognize that, but we can be intimidated to even talk about these processes. If you haven't been through the process, maybe you don't understand the process, right? I hope that these provide some overview of what this looks like. Thank you so much. I appreciate you.